be seated. Good morning, Ms. Ottner. Can you see and hear us?
I can, yes, thank you. Good morning.
Just before we start, there's a change to the sitting times today. We'll sit through to midday without the usual morning break, and then break from 1 to 2. Then the afternoon session will begin at, break from 12 to 1, and the afternoon session will begin at 1. There will be an afternoon break. Now, Ms. Ottner, do you wish to swear an oath or affirm?
Affirm, please.
All right, well, just if you would mind just repeating the words after me. I, Jessica Ann Ottner.
I, Jessica Ann Ottner.
Sincerely declare and affirm.
Sincerely declare and affirm.
That the evidence that I give to this Commission.
That the evidence I give to this Commission.
Shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gandhi.
May it please the Commission appeal for Ms. Ottner.
Thank you.
Ms. Ottner, you prepared a statement dated the 19th of October in response to a summons that's dated 8th of October. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you see a copy of that statement on your screen?
Yes.
The first page should end off with a reference 0910.
Yes.
Can I take you to the last page of the statement, which is the page ending 0926?
Yes.
Is that a Schedule JO-1 that lists various documents?
Yes.
I understand you wish to make 2 amendments to your statement.
Yes.
The first amendment is on the first page of your statement. The word draft before witness statement of Jessica Ann Ottner should be deleted. Is that right?
Yeah. Correct. Yes.
The second amendment is to the last sentence of paragraph 9 that appears on the second page of your statement. So the amendment to the last sentence is such that the sentence should read, I intend to enroll in the Crown training course in responsible gaming.
Well, if it had not been, I think you're right. I think it is well addressed in the witness statement, but if the invitation had not been addressed, then that was an oversight.
Grateful, Commissioner.
But yes, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
The witness statement of Jessica Ann Ottner, dated the 19th of October, bearing the identifier number CRW.998.002.09110, with the 2 amendments that have been discussed, will be admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Thank you. Mr. Futrell.
Please, the Commission. Ms. Ottner, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly. Thank you.
My name is Michael Futrell. I'm one of the counsel assisting the Royal Commission. Do you have a paper copy of your statement with you?
Not with me, no.
I see.
I can get it very easily, though.
We'll
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to have any paper with me, so I didn't bring anything with me.
That's okay. We'll see if we can manage without the paper in front of you. I just want to ask you some questions about some clarifications in your statement to begin with.
Absolutely.
I think you said you were employed as the Group General Manager, Internal Audit on the 21st of May this year?
10th of May.
10th of May, okay. And who's your actual employer?
My employer is Crown Resorts.
That's Crown Resorts Limited?
Yes.
And who specifically employed you in your role?
I had conversations with Alan Seegers and Alan McGregor following the HR process, but my final discussion was with Tony Kasanis.
I see. And at that time, I'll withdraw that. All right. Now, you've mentioned in your statement you received some AML CTF risk awareness training as part of your induction.
That is correct.
Who provided that training to you?
There was every employee of Crown has set training that they need to do, which I have done. And I have also had discussions with the AML team themselves, Mr. Blackburn and Mr. Rule.
Okay.
I've also,
When you say there's set training that every employee does, I asked you who provided the training.
it's an online training. I apologise.
So you did the online training module.
That's correct.
Okay. And have you had any other direct training from a member of the financial crimes team?
Not at the moment. There's some scheduled for December.
Okay, so that was another question I had for you. You've mentioned, you've used the expression upskill myself. What does that mean exactly, upskill?
I have knowledge in lots of different areas, but I'm always looking to continue to increase that knowledge. As part of my role, it's an essential part of an internal auditor to be continually learning and gaining continuous education. So I think it's always important to be reading new things. I am new to gaming as well, so I'm upskilling myself in that sense.
All right. Now, you mentioned there would be some training, I think, in December this year. Do you know what that's likely to cover?
Yes. So the exact agenda has not been set, but I have clear views on what I want it to cover. Just including a lot of changes have happened over the AML program, as you would be aware, and I want to have a full overarching view of what that is. I follow it along, but I want to be able to stop and have a look overall and then have my team undertake just a foundational view. So I know everyone across my team has varying levels and understanding depending on their background. I want to be able to make sure everybody has a foundational knowledge, including all of the key terms, Part A, Part B, what all of that means. So even if they know it at the moment, I can gain comfort in knowing if you're a part of internal audit at Crown, I know you know a minimum number of things. And I think it's right that I participate in that as part of the team, just for completeness purposes.
And do I take it from that answer you're designing your own training, as in your...
No, we will have a dedicated AML trainer as part of Crown, and I have arranged that training with Mr. Blackburn.
I see. So this will be a dedicated trainer within Crown to provide the training directly to you.
That is correct.
In your statement, you've also indicated that as part of your role, you have a functional reporting line to the chair of the Crown Resorts Audit and Corporate Governance Committee.
Yes.
Who is the chair of that committee?
Bruce Carter.
And in practice, how is it that you report directly to the chair?
Well, I will need to talk about my reference to Tony as the change to Bruce, Ms. Kasanis, because Mr. Carter has only just taken over the role. But how that works is I have regular conversations about the strategy, about what I'm going to do, about what the team is going to be doing and how we spend our time. That information is also formally reported for approval by the whole committee as well. So essentially what we do and how we do it is decided and agreed with the audit committee.
Okay, so
that's what I mean by functional.
All right, so just taking the period when Ms. Korsanis was the chair to begin with, when you say regular conversations, are these within or outside the confines of the committee process?
Both, so outside as well. So we would talk on WebEx and the telephone as necessary. So if I have a question about a strategy decision or something that I think I need clarification on or a change, I will discuss that, and everything we talk about it also goes into the paper to ensure that the chair is not having additional information that the rest of the committee isn't as well.
Okay, so when did Mr. Carter take over the role as chair of the committee?
As of the AGM on Thursday.
I see. So have you had an opportunity to have any one-on-one discussions with him as yet?
Not since Thursday, but we had a prior discussion once it was decided that Mr. Carter would take over, just to have an initial and it's not the first time I've spoken with Mr. Carter either, but we had an initial conversation that we would then touch base after the AGM ahead of the next committee as well. And
So you have his telephone number, or
that is correct. I have his telephone number and his email address.
and aside from the contact with either Ms. Corsanis or Mr. Carter, do you have any direct access to other members of the Crown Resorts Board?
I have the contact details for all non-executive directors across all of Crown and its subsidiaries.
And have you had occasion at all since you've been in your current role to contact any of the non-executive directors on matters concerning audit?
I've spoken with Mr. Morrison and I have emailed Ms. Fuster.
So when you're referring there to Ms. Fuster, you mean Ms. Fuster as a director of the Burswood Limited Board?
That's correct.
That was actually going to be my next question. You may have preempted me, Ms. Ottner. So Ms. Fuster is the only member of the Burswood Limited Board at the moment, as I understand it, who is not an employee of the Crown Group.
I don't believe that Mr. Carter is an employee of Crown either.
Yes, has he been appointed, to your knowledge?
Yes, he was appointed. I believe he was appointed at the last board meeting. The motion was moved.
I see. Now, all right. And did you say you'd emailed Ms. Fuster, or did you contact her by telephone? I can't recall.
I emailed her, just giving an update, and also offered the opportunity to discuss the matter further if she wanted to, but it wasn't necessary at the time, as per her direction.
I see. Now, you may not have had an opportunity as yet to go through the process of performance review.
No, I haven't. No.
What is your who is your understanding? Who within the Crown Group would be responsible for undertaking that process with you?
Usually, for a chief audit executive, you go through two processes. I would expect to go through the usual Crown process, just as an employee, in terms of just do I participate in my compliance and all those other key things that make me an employee of Crown. But I would also expect to go through a process with the Crown Resorts Audit and Corporate Governance Committee as well, usually in relation to the performance of internal audit as a whole, and also myself. The committee would be asked about my performance as well and confirm that they are happy with as part of the meeting.
All right, so that's your expectation. So insofar as the Crown Resorts component of that review goes, do you expect that to be undertaken by Mr. McGregor?
Yes, that would be correct.
And when you say it's your expectation, are you aware of any formal process that has already been put in place for that?
There's no process having completed at the moment because I haven't been here for even 6 months yet. So once I reach the 6 months mark and the 12-month mark, that would happen. I do know of changes that are undergoing as part of the transformation project. But I have regular discussions with Mr. McGregor about, what am I providing the services that I need to him from an employee of Crown.
All right. Now, at the time of your employment, who negotiated with you the terms of your remuneration and other terms of employment?
That was Crown, but I did have a discussion with Ms. Kasanis about that as well.
I see.
But it was Crown Resorts.
Can I ask you be shown CRW .700.103/0001, which is a document. I don't know, Ms. Ottner, if you referred to this in your statement or not, but it's a position a position description for your role.
Correct, I can see it.
Are you familiar with this document? Have you seen it before?
I have seen this document, yes.
I've just got a couple of questions about it. On pinpoint 0002, there's an item referred to as special projects.
Yes.
Are you involved in anything that falls in the description of a special project?
I would say yes.
And what are they?
I'm currently on the steerco of the transformation project.
I see. Is this part of the remediation work?
That is correct.
And are there any other, what you might term special projects in view?
No.
I see. And could I take you to pinpoint a little further on? It's 0004, and there's a heading, decision making and advice. And there's a reference on a number of occasions to the board in those in that table.
Yeah.
What is your understanding of the relevant board or boards that are being referred to in there?
So I, as per the diagram that's in the back, so I report formally to the Crown Resorts Audit and Corporate Governance Committee as a delegated authority of the Crown Resorts Limited Board. I also have what I would call a dotted line to each of the 3 subsidiary boards across Burswood, Crown Melbourne Limited and Sydney. So I consider myself responsible for giving the relevant information and assurance of internal audit to all of those governing bodies, and they're collectively known as the board for the ease of reading and writing.
Okay, it might be easier if I just take you to this document. It's CRW.701.009.4482, which is that organisational chart at the back of that position description, but it's a bit bigger and might be easier to read. Now, in this diagram, so just want to understand a little bit more about the way in which you report. So there's a direct line to the Audit and Governance Committee at the top, which is
yes, correct.
The one that is chaired by Mr. Carter.
Yes.
And then you've referred to dotted line reporting to each of these subsidiaries, relevantly for our purposes, Crown Limited. Burswood Limited is one of those. How do you describe the what you mean by dotted line reporting?
So I would be responsible to provide them with the information about internal activity that relates to Burswood Limited. That includes discussing the audit plan with them, providing them updates, information, and answering any other questions they have. It is not common, but it does happen on occasion that a board or a committee of the board might ask for an internal audit to be performed over a particular area. I would say that Burswood Limited would be able to make that request of me without me having to sort of speak to the Crown Resort Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. I would also present to them our statement of independence, any changes to our charter, and the other key things like our strategy, or the key information that would happen. I would give them the same information, but make it relevant to Burswood Limited Board. My understanding of the structure of my reporting is that the Burswood Limited Board does not appoint my role, the CAE. However, there is a connection between Burswood Limited Board and the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee to ensure that Burswood Limited interests and opinions about the performance of the internal audit function is appropriately noted in that decision.
Okay, I was going to take you through the process for this current internal audit plan,
Yes.
You may have described it in a general sense already in that answer. So as I apprehend it, there was an overall internal audit plan for the 3 properties
Yes.
that went to the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee for consideration in
Yes.
August this year, and it was approved.
Correct.
And then the Burswood Limited component of that, which is the internal audit plan for Crown Perth,
Yes.
was then extracted from the bigger plan and taken to the Burswood Limited board.
See, I disagree with that. I see it as I created 3 plans. And just to be clear, the Burswood Limited plan this year was established by the internal auditor of Perth because I was not licensed at that time in Perth. I think it's clear. Those 3 plans are set. We do an overarching Crown one, and we refer to those as group audits, but we do not separate them. We just list them within each of the plans to make it clearer. Each of those 3 are set independently. We then do an analysis over all 3 to make sure we've appropriately covered any broader risks. Those 3 are combined and presented to Crown Resorts, but they are determined on an individual property basis.
Okay.
Based on the risk profiles.
You may be at cross purposes, Ms. Notner. So the overall, as I say, the three separate but conjoined audit plans went to the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee earlier in the year, in August.
Yes, that's correct.
Was considered and approved by that committee.
Correct.
Then, insofar as the audit plan for Perth was concerned, that then went subsequently to the Burswood Limited Board for consideration.
Yes, that's correct.
And it was approved at that meeting in August this year, correct?
That is correct.
And so just to understand one of the answers you gave a little earlier then, if at that meeting involving Burswood Limited there had been some commentary specifically from the Burswood Limited Board, is it your understanding at that point it could have been taken into consideration and an
Absolutely.
amendment made to the Burswood Limited?
Absolutely.
I see. One committee that doesn't feature on this organisational chart but does feature in some of the internal audit documents I'm going to take you to is a body called the ERCC, or the Executive Risk Compliance Committee.
Yep, I'm familiar with it.
It's not mentioned in this chart in any way.
No.
Do you consider yourself to have any reporting role or line with the ERCC?
No, I report information to the ERCC, but I do not report to them. Internal audit did at one time report to them, but we do not anymore.
Okay, that might explain. So can I take you to another document which is referred to in, I think it's referred to in your statement, which is the Internal Audit Manual.
Yes, there is a section at the front in reporting which says that there's going to be a couple of things approved by the ERCC, etc. That is legacy and has not been updated. This document is due for update in one go, and there are a number of minor. You'll notice, like the number of team members is not correct. The ERCC component is not correct. However, that's due for update in November.
All right, I might just take you through some of them because I've noticed there's some potential disconnection between what you've said in your statement and what's in this manual. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yep.
At pinpoint 4411, this may have been what you were just referring to. There's a reference there to the ERCC.
Yes, that's correct.
So that there's going to be an update to this manual, and that will no longer be a reference.
That's correct. So the Internal Audit Charter is, to me, the document which governs what we do and how we act. This is a procedural document used by the team on a day-to-day basis. And the structure of it is very much reflected of historical way of acting. I plan on removing this information and just referring it to the charter. However, what I didn't want to do is create an environment where I was continuously updating this document as we went through getting the charter approved, the team approved, etc. And we'll just do it in one go.
All right, so does that, although you've mentioned the internal audit manual, then can we essentially assume that it's a document that's going to be reviewed and made consistent with the current process?
Absolutely, that's correct.
All right, then can I just take you then to the internal audit charter, which is I expect is a more current document, which is
That is correct.
CR.700.095.0024. And I just want to ask you one question that arises from this. So on pinpoint 0025, under the heading Internal Audits Responsibilities, there's one bullet point that refers to keeping abreast of emerging business issues, risks.
Oh, sorry, I don't think that's on my screen. Apologies.
Should be on pinpoint 0025. Sorry, you need to follow. Yes, my apologies, it wasn't there yet. Ms.
No problems. It is now.
So the second last bullet point on that page refers to keeping abreast of emerging business issues, risks, and so forth.
Yep.
Since your appointment in May, have there been any emerging business issues or risks that you have identified or that the internal audit function has identified?
Different to, so I would say that we have identified, not particularly. The things that I would say were emerging risks for us at the time, at the beginning, I was responsible gaming. However, that got explored further following the Victorian Rural Commission. So I would no longer say that that was an emerging, it's now a known. When I first started, some of the opportunities to enhance our control environment and the formalisation of that environment was something that I had identified. However, that has also been captured as part of the cultural transformation program. So there's been nothing else that I have noted that would fall into this category. However, it's always something that's at the forefront of my mind.
And either of those two things that you're saying have now been picked up either in the Royal Commission in Victoria or in the cultural transformation, are they matters that have been brought to the attention of the Burswood Limited Board, to your knowledge?
The responsible gaming one, absolutely. I discussed it as part of my plan. The control framework, I don't know. I haven't spoken to them about it, but it will feature in my next paper. So if they haven't already, it definitely will.
Okay, and is there a mechanism in place for the internal audit function to identify emerging business risks and issues?
Yes.
And what is that mechanism?
We meet regularly with each of the of our key stakeholders. So, for example, I meet with the executive, the EGMs, so the executive general managers. I speak with the Cs of the different departments. We talk about what's happening in the business. I read the board papers, the risk committee, etc., things that may not otherwise come across my desk. And the team also has responsibilities in terms of stakeholder engagement to understand that. I monitor, I'm subscribed to our regulator newsletters where they're possible. I monitor the newspapers and essentially all the industry news as well. So that all of those things together help us to keep abreast. We attend webinars by the industry, the IAA, and other relevant industries such as ISACA for IT audit risks, etc. All of these things help influence things that might become emerging business risks, whether it's to do with gaming compliance or just us operating as a business.
And is there a mechanism for bringing those emerging risks and issues to the attention of the board of Crown Resorts?
It would be part of my overview at the front of my paper, if relevant.
For the committee, the Audit and Governance Committee?
It would be for all of my papers. So if it was an emerging risk, I would discuss it with ERCC in general to understand what the business is already doing. And then depending on that, if I felt it was being comfortably addressed, it would be noted in each of the committee updates, including Burswood Limited. If it was something that was emerging, I would, say, for example, what cybersecurity was once upon a time when it was just coming out, nobody really understood it. It was one of the things we would monitor, and I would speak to the board to understand what their appetite was in terms of, do we monitor it? We always think of a risk in a sense of, do we audit it, do we monitor it, or do we accept it? And that's a decision that would be made in conjunction with the board. And each of the 3 subsidiaries may not hold the same position depending on the risk profile for them, and that would be documented appropriately.
So the example you've given of cyber risk is that was in a previous role with another organisation, I take it?
It was, yes. It's just something that people usually can understand.
You're using that as an example of the kind of risk that would be regarded as emerging, and you would bring it to the attention of the relevant.
That is correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Can I? We may need to call up your statement for this exercise, Ms. Altner. If I could take you to the statement. Yes, thank you. It's pinpoint 0913 and paragraph 19, 20 and 21. You may need to help me with the pronunciation of the internal audit manager for Perth. Is it Ms. Van de
Westhuizen.
Westhuizen?
Yes.
Now, she occupies the role of the internal audit manager for Perth.
That is correct.
And her responsibility, as I read your statement, is for managing the delivery of audits in Perth.
That is correct. So Ms. Van der Westhuizen is responsible for the overarching delivery of the internal audit plan for Crown Perth. So that includes mobilising the team, scheduling the audits, doing all of the initial reviews, maintaining all the stakeholder relationships on a ground level, usually sort of GM and below.
And her responsibility doesn't include undertaking the audits herself, though, does it?
Not often. So it is possible that Ms. Van der Westhuizen would do an audit. One of 2 reasons. Occasionally something comes up. We're requested to do a small piece of work that we don't know that might be important for us to do, but we don't have any capacity at that time. So she might just pick it up. And occasionally we have what I would call high risk or sensitive issues, sometimes related to executive remuneration or something of that nature, that it's more appropriate that a more seasoned or sort of senior auditor might undertake. But as a rule, her primary responsibility is managing the team to deliver it. Okay.
Now, there's another role, the senior internal auditor, that Ms. Cassandra Lee has occupied.
She does at the moment. She leaves at the beginning of November.
I see that. So as of the 8th of November, that position will be vacant?
That is correct.
And the table indicates that Crown Perth is recruiting to fill that role. Has that role been filled?
That one has not. Some of the others, so the internal auditor role, we're in the final stage of background checks and is likely to be filled within the next week, if not this week.
So you're now referring to item 3, the senior internal auditor role. That's a new role that you.
No, number 4. The number 2 and number 3 roles we are actively recruiting for at the moment and have held numerous interviews. However, I haven't found a candidate that we're happy with yet.
I see. So in respect of item 4 then, there is someone in view for that role.
Absolutely.
And you expect that to be filled shortly, do you?
Very shortly, yes.
I see, okay. And there's another role across the page in item 12, which is a position for a senior IT auditor.
Yes.
At what stage is the recruitment process for that role?
I believe the meeting with the recruitment team is scheduled for later this week, or is going to be scheduled. I saw an email chain yesterday about it. We have only just commenced recruitment for that, which is different to the other roles. We have been waiting for the IT audit manager. She only just started on the, I've lost date, the 4th of October, I think it was.
So do I understand then of the 5 Perth-specific roles, one is currently filled, one is
Yes.
about to be filled, and there are 3 yet to be filled?
Yes, that is correct. 2 of those roles are new, and we've just within the last couple of weeks started recruiting for the newer roles. I'm conscious of the gaps and have commenced discussions with the co-source provider if we're unable to fill these roles shortly as a stopgap.
What do you mean by? I've seen this referred to elsewhere in the papers, either in your statements, the documents that refer to it. What do you mean by co-sourced?
It's a very common relationship that exists between an internal audit function and an external party. That may be a Big Four accounting firm or a top 10 accounting firm, commonly, but sometimes a specialist as well, depending on what you're doing. And it enables you to basically extend the size of your team and have them to assist you. And the idea is that the partner that you engage provides either assistance when you need additional capacity or you need special expertise. The idea of a co-source partner doesn't mean you can't use any other third party at any time, but the idea is it takes time to get to know a business, and the success of an audit often comes down to how well you either know the area and or know the business to be able to apply the risk-based skills in the environment which they operate. So by having a co-source partner, for example, Deloitte or PwC, EY, etc., or a firm such as that with the appropriate skills, can work with us as an extension of our team to deliver the audits. And we agree what the methodology would look like in the reporting cadence, and then we're able to use that to supplement our own team as well.
And do you have an arrangement currently in place for Crown Perth with a co-source partner?
Not currently in place, but I have started that process and intend to have that appointed by the end of November.
And so who in Crown Perth currently is undertaking audits?
Cassandra Lee is doing audits. Mrs. Van der Westhuizen, has been assisting with key audits. And we had another auditor who just left a couple of weeks ago and has been auditing this whole time as well. The current vacancies have only either are going to happen or soon to happen. Up until October, we had a full suite except for the new roles.
And has there been any effect in terms of the audit program for Crown Perth for the current financial year as a consequence?
Not at the moment. So we've been working to the current plan. So there will be a slowdown over November as we have that gap. But that's the intent of the co-source partner to supplement that month and then any other delay we have in filling. So the delivery of the plan will not be impacted by the end of the year. It will be in the short term, obviously, but not by the end of the year, no.
Okay. Now, given what you've said in the table under paragraph 19, which is, and we've been through the necessity. There's a process in which you are actively recruiting roles, filled some or about to fill others. When you say in paragraph 21 of your statement that, in your view, internal audit is currently adequately resourced, what do you exactly you mean by that?
Resource has a number of components. So one, I look at the number of roles on the org chart with which I have budgetary approval. I look at the ability for me to fill those roles, for example, access to appropriate recruitment channels, etc. And I also look at things like the tools that we have, training plans, etc. So that's what I think of. So if I think about the gaps in the team, if I didn't have a co-source budget, I might be cause for concern, but I do have that. When I raised, when we had the internal movements, some of the team is moving internally. I raised this with Mr. McGregor in our regular catch-ups, and it's also been will be discussed with the Burswood Limited board when we speak to them. And I have been given the indication that if additional funds are needed to cover that, in addition to the specialist resource that we need, that'll be covered as well. But I think it's also important to note that the senior IT auditor role, we knew that that was going to be a new role and wouldn't be starting recruitment until November. So currently there has been absolutely no impact to the plan, and there's no delay there. It has been a deliberate decision to only start recruiting now.
Okay, thank you. While we're doing the topic of resourcing, can I ask that you be shown CRW .701.006.2821, which...
can I just rise and invite my friend to just keep this confined to the personal screens? I'm instructed that there is potentially commercially sensitive information.
All right.
We can confine this to the personal screens then, yes. I think I mentioned this to you a little earlier, Ms. Altner. It was these are the papers for an audit and governance committee meeting in August, at which the internal audit plan for 2022 to 2024 was discussed.
That's correct.
If I could take you to pinpoint point 3050, which is part of your internal audit activity report for that month.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions about some of this. Appears to be dealing in part with the budget for the following document, which is the internal audit plan.
Yes.
And there's a heading, third line of defence.
That's correct.
And there's a paragraph that starts, there has been a significant investment not only in the enhancement of the second line assurance functions, but also in the tools and resources that support the wider control framework.
Yes.
However, this increased focus on the second line comes a need to ensure there is a robust and adequately resourced third line.
Yes, that's correct.
What exactly are you meaning to convey by that passage in?
It is my responsibility, as per the standards, to present a plan and a budget to the audit committee for approval. But I need to be able to justify my rationale for that. Why do I think, it's not okay for me to just say, this is, give me this. I have to be able to say, this is my risk and business-based reason for asking it. So that was part of that discussion. So ultimately, the amount of assurance that needs to happen at Crown has increased with the change in the understanding of the risk profile. That includes the third line. So I was just, it's something that's well understood, but I felt it was important to document it as part of the rationale behind what was a significant increase in the request for budget support of internal audit.
Okay, and then is it on the same page as a heading, second line work, and it refers to historical weakness in the second line, meaning that internal audit has undertaken work traditionally associated with the second line. There, and there's a reference there, a particular reference to Perth in that context.
Yes, there has not been a lot of people in the second line doing that work. and some of the responsibility has fallen within internal audit to do that, which is not uncommon in organisations that don't run a 3 lines of defence model. However, as the organisation had confirmed its commitment to the 3 lines of defence model, the need to separate that work from internal audit was very important, and that has already commenced.
Do I understand that? Is that the change in Ms. Lee's role? When is it? Part of the separation of second and third lines?
No, so essentially the internal audit function has its plan that it delivers, but there's also a series of other work, and it sort of references second line. If you looked at the updates, it's now referred to, it used to be called sort of the gaming audits. Now we just, to make it clearer, second line of defence. So they're essentially monitoring activities, so types of audits undertaken by internal audit, but the nature of those audits is what we would call monitoring rather than risk-based, and that has been taken up by internal audit over the time. And it was done by Ms. van der Westhuizen, but it's also done by other team members as well. All
right, and is it your plan or understanding that you're going to separate that function from internal audit?
Absolutely. So the work so it's not related to a person, it's the work. So the work has been identified, clearly articulated, and we've identified the team it will be handed across to, and discussions of that have already started and have been going on for a couple of weeks, a couple of months actually.
Okay, now on the next page there's a reference to, this is pinpoint 3051, current capacity. And do I understand from this essentially is you're expressing the view that there needs to be an increase in the resources in the internal audit function?
Yes, that's correct. We almost doubled the size of the team.
And that's reflected in part in that table under paragraph 19 of your statement.
Yes, yep. That's correct.
And you've mentioned already, you've explained in some detail what co-sourced arrangements mean.
Yes.
There's also a reference there to specialist areas and a particular reference there to AML.
Yes.
What is the current proposal with respect to AML audits?
My current proposal is that we use the co-source partner to do those audits while I gain comfort of the knowledge and approach of our in-house team. So it is my intent that we do a mix of some of them will be done by the in-house team and some by co-source over the time. But I wanted to be able to be very clear and have time to make sure we have all the training and skills that we need if we don't already. And we have a lot of new people who will be joining as part of the team, and that's going to take time. So I want to be able to use an external person to use that. And that will be part of the co-source arrangement and a key part of the decision in understanding the credentials of the teams that are available.
And have you selected the co-source partner at this stage?
No, not yet. I've narrowed down people and the request for tender will be going out this Friday. I will be reviewing those and making what I think is the selection, and then taking that for approval to the relevant boards, committees.
Okay, can I take you to the next page, which is pinpoint 3052, and there's a table. So there's a proposed team changes heading.
Yes.
And there's a sort of flow diagram. I just want to draw your attention to the table in the middle of that page towards the bottom that has current, additional and total. Is that what you've been describing as the budget for?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
And in your statement, in one of the footnotes near to the table, you've indicated that there is budget approval. Is that the budget that you're referring to for it's been approved?
Yes, that is correct.
And how has this budget been approved exactly?
It was presented and discussed at each of the different subsidiary boards and the Crown Limited board, where we discussed the numbers and how in terms of the number of people and the number of resources that we need, and confirmed that these numbers were approved.
And under the column additional, does that that picks up? Does that pick up co-sourcing as well as externals?
That's correct. So the outsource partner is 0.15.
Right. And would that would be specifically for the AML component, would it not?
Originally I only planned on using that for AML. That's correct. But since we've had the vacancies, I will need to increase it, which was my reference to needing additional money earlier, which I'd spoke to Mr. McGregor about.
So this budget may need to be increased yet more.
Yes.
To cover the co-sourcing component.
Absolutely, but that's only happened in the last couple of weeks. It was not a known factor when I submitted this.
All right. Now, who, if you like, which entity in the group is responsible for paying for all the internal audit function?
I have to admit, I don't know the answer to that. I have never asked whether or not our costs are assigned out.
Okay.
Mr. Futrell, just before that, if that could go back, if you pop that back in, I just want to ask Mr. Ottner, this chart here is different to the one that you were shown earlier. Does it replace it, or is this a different sort of chart?
Okay, so there's two things in this chart. You'll notice I don't have the reporting lines in it. So after I did this chart during the discussion, we were discussing the different reporting lines, etc. And I thought for clarity, it might be useful to include our reporting lines at the top for anybody looking at it. So it's a subsect of the same chart. Just following discussions, I added the additional bit in for clarity.
So we can still rely on the earlier one. That's I'll just repeat the number. I think it's CRW.701.009.4482. We can still rely on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. There's no need to bring it up.
All right. Now, Ms. Ottner, you may have already dealt with this in part. I would like to take you back to your statement, if I may, to paragraph 24. And I think it may be clear what this means now. The first sentence refers to internal audit at Crown Perth having completed some second line monitoring activities.
Yes.
Account for approximately half of the internal audit position's time.
No, half of one internal audit position.
Half of one.
Yes.
So, so does that, just to be clear about this, if we go back to the table in paragraph 19 then, it's half of one of either the senior internal auditors or the newly to be appointed internal auditor, is it?
That's correct.
And does that continue to be the case?
Right now?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. So we're still doing that work at the moment. I had not envisioned that it would be before Christmas. The earlier the better, obviously, from our perspective. But I assumed it would be as late as Christmas because these things do take time, and it's important that we continue to do that monitoring in the meantime. And we had accounted for that in the internal audit plan. So once that had been done, I would then allocate that additional time out to additional audits once it had been confirmed.
Okay, thank you. Now, sticking with your statement for a moment, there's in paragraph, this is in the same section, I think we are dealing with the work and resourcing of the internal audit function. In paragraph 27, in the last sentence, there's a reference to transformation assurance work. And I think a similar phrase is used in one of the documents you've referred to in the statement as well. What's that? What is the nature of that transformation assurance work?
So there's the remediation plan and the cultural transformation plan, which are a part of our response to the changes of Crown. So that includes uplift to our controls, to our risk framework, to sort of training, our policies, lots of different things. I believe you have seen the remediation plan. So I think it's important when you're making this much change for an organisation that key areas assurance is being provided over it, and will be something that we'll need to do. So that's what this refers to.
Okay. Can I, sorry, jumping around a bit, Ms. Otten, I want to now take you to the internal audit plan for Perth for 2022-2024, which is referred to in your statement CRW.701.009.4458. And the first, first I want to draw to attention is pinpoint 4462. And I asked you a question a little earlier about the ERCC and if it had any role to play.
Yes.
Under the risk-based internal audit plan diagram, far right-hand column underneath that, there are 2 bullet points under the obtain approval for plan.
Yep.
It refers to presenting a draft plan to the ERCC.
That's correct.
Was that undertaken?
It wasn't undertaken in the end because the ERCC meeting didn't happen in August. But when I prepared this, I believed it was going to happen. So which is why it isn't there. But and it will be a normal part of the plan to discuss it with the ERCC. But as you see there, it says present and not obtain approval.
Okay, just so I'm clear on the process going forward then, is it the case that in future the role of the ERCC will be, there will be a role in that your draft plan we presented to it for comments presumably by the executives?
Absolutely. So each of the executives, I discuss it with them individually, but I think there is value in seeing it as a whole in a fresh pair of eyes to see if there are any additional comments,
I see.
anything that we think we may want to add to the plan. It's just a final sense check by the executive about their understanding of the business. And during the discussion, there might be something they've come up that makes them think of something they might want to say.
Okay. Now, can I move forward now to pinpoint point 4467? Which gives a breakdown of the resources. Now, there's a sort of a pie chart in the middle of the page on the right-hand side, total available audit days, and it tallies to 600. There's an orange 118, which makes reference to the second line assurance function.
That's correct.
That's what we have been, you're referring to as half of one auditor?
That's correct.
Insofar as the actual internal audit function goes, do I understand that to mean there are actually 482 days allocated?
Yes, that's correct.
And 402 specifically, and 80 for, if you like, ad hoc or other matters.
Yeah, I think we always leave some unallocated to address the emerging risks that we were discussing earlier.
Right. Now, the Commission has received some evidence earlier in the hearings from Ms. Murray, who was the internal auditor for Perth, or the last dedicated internal auditor for Perth some time ago. And the strategic audit plan for the financial years 2017 to 2019 allocated 950 audit days to Perth.
Yes.
And the resources in terms of the number of auditors was not dissimilar to what is set out in your table 19, under the paragraph 19.
Yes.
Are you aware of the earlier internal audit plan?
I haven't read them in detail, but I have cast my eye over them. I did a review when I first came to just understand the principle of how internal audit planning was done prior to my arrival.
And do you have a sense of why there may have been such a reduction in terms of the number of internal audit days?
I haven't seen. I don't have access to the calculations of the prior ones. However, I am very comfortable with these numbers because you take the total number of working days, you reduce holidays. I always leave training days, appropriate for sick leave, and that leaves their total available days, and those available days are done. I have not been able to reconcile. When I look at some of the ones, it wasn't Miss Murray's, but a different manager. Annual leave, etc., was not always appropriately taken into account in the calculation. And what I noticed was that quite often internal audit was not completing its plan, but that's because it wasn't taking into account the available days. It just looked at total days. And it's quite unreasonable that the team would not take holidays.
And okay, that might be part explanation. Is there any element of efficiency associated with having a centralised audit function? In other words, is any part of the internal audit function for Crown Perth being performed in Melbourne or in Sydney?
Yes, that is possible, and it is possible that Perth does. When we do group audits, sometimes we have it managed out of, say, Perth, even though they do all three. And just recently, we were doing some work over our GST control framework. We had somebody in Melbourne with tax background, so they were working on the Perth audit just to provide that extra knowledge as well. So whilst each team, as a rule, looks after the property that they are based in, we do work as one team where necessary and appropriate.
And in that pie chart that is in the plan, is any part of that taking into account personnel outside of Crown Perth, or is this specifically for
No,
Perth?
This is Crown Perth.
I see. All right. Now, can I ask you some questions about the remediation plan, which
yes.
you have covered to some degree, Ms. Ottner, in your statement. Now, in paragraph 57, you refer back to your answers to question 11, which is there in paragraphs 36 to 42, and I think you're really setting out there. I'm presuming you're familiar with the remediation.
I am. It's not on my screen though, just in case you know. But yes, I am. I'm very familiar with the remediation plan.
So, and you're familiar with item 40 being specifically your area?
That is correct.
And if I understand this part of the statement correctly, you're really explaining there what has already taken place up to this point in time.
Yep. There is a line in the remediation plan that talks about my role doing an initial review upon starting, and this talks about what I did.
All right. I just want to ask you one question about this. In paragraph 42...
sorry, can I just ask that the remediation plan not be shown on any public
Again,
screens?
just on the personal screen, please.
So I didn't call for it, but someone's in front of me. Sorry, if we could go back to your statement in paragraph 42, Ms. Ottner. There's a reference there to an internal audit strategy.
Yes.
What exactly is that?
It's a key part of any internal audit function to have a strategy. So the way I like to do it is I always do it the meeting. Usually I would do it the meeting before the internal audit plan is presented, but obviously that wasn't possible because of the timing of when I started. So I'm going to do it afterwards. It sets out the sort of how you do internal audit. It defines are you risk-based? What type of tools do you use? How to use data analytics? What what are you now and where do you want to be? Continuous improvement and evolution is a key part of internal audit as a profession, and we always like to be demonstrating that evolution. It would integrate things like what are our KPIs? How do we measure success? And it's a document that quite often is a 3-year plan, doesn't always have to be, and it's referenced specifically in the internal audit standards.
And how far through that process are you now? It's talking about completing it by the end of November.
I've got about 3/4 of it done.
And is it your proposal that will be then presented to the Audit and Governance Committee?
That is correct.
And will it also end up being presented to the Burswood Limited Board?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I think then in paragraphs 57 onwards in your statement, you're describing something you referred to as the Audit Uplift Initiative.
Yes.
Just before I ask you about that, in item 40, of the, you don't need to bring this up, of the remediation plan, it indicates that under proposed next steps, it says that you've made a number of recommendations and they're available to regulators on request.
Yep.
What are the recommendations that you have made?
That it's the same. This is the same thing. So I've summarised that the uplift program is the same as the response there. So the recommendations that I made included increasing the size of the team, shifting to more of a risk-based auditing approach rather than compliance-based, and just diversifying the knowledge of the team. Such example, when we do increase the team to recruit people with backgrounds in things like IT audit, data analytics, fraud investigations, just to help round out the overall skill set of the team. And, for the ease of discussion, I named that the Audit Uplift Program. But it's the same information that you see in my statement.
I see. Okay. Then can I ask you some questions about this uplift program then?
Yes.
In paragraph 59C, you have referred to improving the link between the risk register and the audit plan.
Yep.
What processes have you put in place, or do you plan putting in place to improve that link, or what do you mean by that exactly?
No, so already done it. So when we had it up earlier in the screen, there was the percentage links. So previously there was no tangible way of tracing how we establish our plan in relation to the risk register. So it was always referenced in the internal audit plan document, but you were not able to draw a direct comparison and link between the internal audit plan and the risk register. So those percentages that we're looking at earlier was done that. Well, it's a demonstration of that link that we've done. I always like to make sure that all of the areas are considered as part of the internal audit planning process, just to make sure, a key of internal audit is to look in the right areas, and the risk register provides a great direction of where that might be a good place to look.
Okay, then under 59D, you've referred to developing a process to improve the implementation of internal audit recommendations.
That's correct.
What has that process been developed?
It's happening as we speak. It's a massive part of what we're doing at the moment. So it was a very passive process. On a quarterly basis, emails were sent out, people would respond, etc. So I want a more regular and proactive approach for all of the actions that are taken. And I've changed the way that the numbers are reported. Previously, the table was combined. You weren't able to always clearly see which one's related to Perth, which one's related to Melbourne, etc. And I felt like that created a sort of lack of visibility and accountability where necessary. And I also brought it from the sort of the grid table to the second page, sort of actually the first page of the report if you exclude the title page, because I think that it's very important, and it really highlights the importance of those things getting done.
So this is a mechanism to keep track of what recommendations have come out of audits and ensuring that the recommendations are
Implemented. That's correct.
And with respect to 59E, you've made reference to changing the internal audit activity reporting to be more specific. Is that what you were mentioning in part in your answer to the earlier question?
True, that yes. And when I started, what I noticed was that one pack was prepared, reporting pack, and it was presented to ERCC and to all the different subsidiaries and to the board. There wasn't a separate one for each one. And whilst you would definitely expect to see some information that is the same, 100%, I didn't think it was targeted enough. So if I was Burswood Limited, which of this exactly relates to Perth? What is it? I want to be able to pick it up and really look at it and have a robust discussion about it. So I separated out each of the different information for the subsidiary boards. It all goes in combined up for Crown Limited. I've also added in additional commentary. Before it was just a little bit of this is what we've done rather than this is what we've done and this is what it means. And as we've introduced root cause analysis and other tools, we'll be able to give more insights into the work that we do as part of that, specific to each property.
Right, thank you. Now, in 59J, you've referred to arranging for a review of the risk management framework.
That's correct.
My query here is that a role that falls within internal audit, or is that more for the risk management area?
No, so this is us assessing the effectiveness of the risk function. So something that's really key for internal audit is to understand the effectiveness of different assurance partners in the risk function. So that, for example, I mentioned that we sort of utilise the risk register to influence our work. Well, it's really important that when we do that, that we have comfort that the risk register and the processes of risk are done in a way that we can place reliance on that. And it's also part of our risk management strategy that review happens and on a regular basis. And it's often falls to internal audit to help do that to ensure independence.
Okay. In one of the documents that I think referred to in your statement, there's a reference to something called an assurance mapping exercise.
That's correct.
What is that?
So an assurance map is sort of a way of thinking about the way assurance is delivered in an organisation, and they can look in lots of different ways. It's a tool, and they're very helpful for looking for assurance gaps. So, and often this isn't it, but what you would normally expect to see is each of your key areas down one side. Sometimes you have key auditable areas such as people, finance, sort of gaming, compliance, etc. It depends on the organisation, and then you'd have first line, second line, third line across the top, and it talks about what they're doing. The idea of it is one, if we know there's a lot of first and second line assurance activity happening, we've done appropriate effectiveness reviews. We can, what they call, place reliance on that, and it might decrease the amount of work that we do or influences the type of work that we do. Rather than doing a health check across lots of different areas, we might pick one area and do a deep dive, for example. And it helps stop what we call duplicate assurance. There are always going to be areas where you do have lots of eyes on it because of the risk that it poses. And it also helps to identify any areas that may pose a risk but aren't getting any assurance. And that also helps to influence our resourcing needs, etc.
All right, if we go back to that document that was up, which is the CRW 0.701.009.4454, this is a sort of a Gantt chart of the progress of the uplift that you're involved in. I take it that this, what we've just been discussing, which is this assurance mapping exercise, is something that is about to take place?
It just started, I think, I want to say last week, could have been the week before, the days melded into each other. So we're starting with, I think it's responsible gaming, AML, and there's another area that slipped my mind. And we're going to do that exercise. And then, because we need to agree what's the format going to be, what's useful. And then once we've done that, we will then move to other areas in the business as well. So we're starting with responsible gaming.
All right, can I, if I might, just take you back again to the current audit plan. Before I do, you mentioned earlier some audit types. If I take you to CRW.701.009.4455, I think this is a guidance note referred to.
That's correct.
Statement. So this explains, when you look at the audit plan, this gives an explanation of the type of audit that is described in each item, correct?
Yes, so you mentioned that I hadn't gone about updating the manual in one go, but so you'll notice that there are audit types in the manual. Where I thought there was a real shift, rather than it being an administrative update, where there's a real shift that influenced the kind of how we did it, and the team needed clarity, and I needed clarity to be able to present to the board, I did a guidance note to provide that extra information, so it was very clear, and this is one of those.
So in terms of the kinds of audits, a deep dive is one where you are really looking into the nature of the process and assessing whether it is effective, amongst other things, to control the risk in question.
So the difference between a deep dive and a health check would be the amount of sampling that you do. So the nature and intent of a deep dive and a health check are the same. You're looking at design effectiveness and operating effectiveness. You're looking at the process, how it is identified, what's the risks, have we got the controls in responding to those, and what the process looks like. The big difference is the amount of sampling that you would do.
I see. So in both instances, you're looking to see not only are the processes that are in place being implemented, but are those processes themselves effective to control the risk in question? Okay.
Absolutely.
So if we could go back to the CRW.701.009.4458, which is the Perth internal audit plan, and go to pinpoint 0.4468. The first item on the plan for this financial year is to audit the AML financial crime framework.
Yep.
And it's referred to as a health check, and that was intended to be outsourced to a third party.
That's correct.
There, a little further on, there is a significant player process, which is on page 4470.
Yes, the SPR process.
That also involves an element of AML risk.
Yes.
And there's going to be a deep dive. That one is not outsourced. That will be done internally.
So the SPR process is something that we absolutely have the skills in-house to do. I'm very familiar with that process. I'm very comfortable with that process. And the auditor, this audit will be, Ms. van der Westhuizen will be very close to this, because it requires that extra knowledge of gaming and the way our teams work. I have more faith in this being done by somebody with extensive gaming experience and understanding the way information moves. We're also working closely with the AML team in relation to the updates that they're making to this, and that will provide us with the additional expertise that we need.
Okay, and then when we move to the next financial year, 2023, there's no indication of the level of the audit for that year. It's simply area.
Yes, so that's something that I look at each year. There's no value to me in looking that far ahead, because what I would do is the budgeted days give me a rough idea. I make an assumption that everything's sort of a bit of a health check, and then if it needs to go deep dive, I would adjust it appropriately. I like to do it year on, so it's very fresh. I understand what the current risk profile, and for example, I might say a deep dive today, but then the risk profile might change. For example, they might increase, make changes to the control environment, do improvements, etc. So there may be more of a need to do a design, one design check and a health check at a later point. So I don't see value in doing it that far out.
All right. Now, I've just got a question which I'd like you to clarify if you don't, something for me if you don't mind. So,
yeah.
In paragraph 22 of your statement, you've indicated that one of the virtues of having an internal audit manager in Perth is that that person's on the ground, understands what's happening on the property, etc.
Yes, that's correct.
In the case of AML and CTF, there is going to be an outsourcing of the audit function.
Yes.
Are you not going to lose that element of an understanding of the way in which the property actually operates in practice through that process?
Not necessarily. So there's different ways about how you structure co-sourcing. So sometimes you would have them work entirely separately. Sometimes you have them work alongside your team. That's the importance of having somebody co-source with you rather than just doing it on an individual basis. So it would be quite normal to have some people from a firm and working with somebody alongside our team in a joint initiative. You can also have that team delivering it and using our team to do subject matter expert input and reviews as well. So you gain the benefit of having the SME or subject matter expert view from an AML perspective and the knowledge of Crown, and you bring those two things together.
All right, thank you. I've just got some general questions now, if you don't mind, Ms. Ottner, about the approach to internal audit at Crown since you've arrived.
Yes.
I take it you may not have read the Bergen report in its entirety, but I'm sure you're familiar generally with its conclusions.
I read it right at the start of working here, but I don't know it in depth. I have read it once, but I do know the principles very well. Yes.
I'm going to summarise a couple of the major conclusions that form part of our terms of reference for this commission.
Yep.
I'm slightly going to paraphrase them, but one of the recitals to the terms of reference for this commission records that the Bergen inquiry found that Crown Resorts Limited had facilitated money laundering through accounts of, amongst other companies, a company called Riverbank Investments.
Yes.
Unchecked and unchanged in the face of warnings from its bankers. That was essentially a conclusion of a summary of what was said in the Bergen inquiry. Would you accept the proposition that whatever internal audit program Crown Perth had in place before the Bergen inquiry, none of the AML and CTF audits identified that risk of an absence of a control over the Riverbank Investments bank accounts as an element of the AML CTF program?
What was the exact question? Sorry.
Whatever internal audit process was in place in Perth at the time didn't identify that gap in the risk analysis.
That's correct.
And there might be a number of reasons for that, but at least it didn't identify and bring it to the attention of anyone in the board structure.
That is correct.
Similarly, one of the terms of reference we have records that the Bergen inquiry found that Crown Resorts Limited entered into or continued commercial relationships with junket operators who had links to triads and other organised crime organisations. And again, whatever internal audit function was operating in Perth prior to Bergen, the Bergen inquiry, it didn't identify an absence of control over that risk.
Yes, that is correct.
So in the time that you have been in the position you're in with Crown Resorts, has there been any investigation into the internal audit function in Crown Perth during that pre-Bergen period to consider if there was some failing in that process that led to that gap, that non-identification of risk?
I think my first comment, so the answer is not specifically with that mandate. Internal audit's role is to provide reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, but in the principle of what you're asking, I have looked at two main things because I have considered this as well upon commencing. Is one, what was the focus of internal audit? How did we set our plan? Why did we direct our attention to certain activities and not others? How did that link to the risk profile? Did we have access to the information we needed to understand the risk profile itself to be identify such risks if they did exist? And also, are the audits undertaken in such a way that we would identify those risks if they were there, if sampling was appropriate? In relation to the access to information, previously there was a sort of a ceiling with which internal audit had access to, which I think has been discussed at this commission, but that no longer exists. I now attend boards directly. I have access to the executives. I have unfettered access to whatever I need to do my job. Two, the way we set our plan. This is one of the things that was very important to me, that we align with our risks and understand the risk profile ourselves. So, where is the inherent risk of gaming, and also non-gaming risks such as, safety of our people as well, and safety of our customers, and etc. So that's another thing that I've done, and also the way we do our audits. So historically, I had a look at the way audits were being delivered, and there was a real focus on compliance. So if the policy says this, do we do it? If the document A says this, do we do it? But there weren't necessarily questions about, does this document say what it needs to say? How is it designed? What are the risks associated with this process, and do we have controls to address that, even if it sits outside of that document? We need to obviously assess compliance with regulations and the documents themselves, but it needs to be thought about from a risk-based perspective as well. And that has been probably the biggest change that I've made since starting, is to introduce tools which helps to facilitate that process in risk and control matrices.
All right. So can I just go back then to sort of ask the question again in a slightly more direct way?
Sure.
In the process you've undertaken, have you, sorry, I'll start again by starting with this. You may have a well-designed internal audit program that just misses something because doing
absolutely.
it so that it can happen. So the question I'm really asking is, have you analysed the programs that were in place in Crown Perth pre-Bergen to see if they just were unlucky in the sense they had appropriate audits but missed it, or have you analysed it from the perspective of they weren't looking in the right places?
I have analysed where they were looking, and from the way they were prepared at the time, I couldn't see anything indicating that they weren't doing what they needed to do. With the information that we have now, it's very clear. But based on the documents that I've read, the audit reports that I have, the testing, the files that sit behind it, it's just clear that they had there was nothing that they could have done differently.
All right. But nonetheless, I think you said that one of the changes you have implemented, or if I understood your answer earlier, the observation you made was there was a focus on compliance,
yes,
not so much on whether or not the system that was in place was adequately addressing the risk.
And that's part of the strategy of the internal audit function. So their strategy at the time was focusing on that. That was a decision that was made at the time. Whereas I'm choosing to do a strategy that focuses based on risk, which is considered to be a more modern approach.
And so can I ask this question then, so far as the design of the AML CTF audits for the future are concerned,
Yes.
is it your intention that one of their features will be to assess whether, not only if it complies with the letter of the AML-CTF Act, but whether its design is effective to capture all risks?
Absolutely. So that will be done partly by us and also partly by an independent review, which is kicking off in December this year.
And will that be is that part of the internal audit function review, or is that going to be undertaken by financial crime itself?
No, so it started in financial crime, but as we've moved to strengthen the 3 lines of defence, the ownership of that has moved to internal audit. And I just recently, last week, selected the firm for that, and we're going through the process of appointing them. And it will be run and owned by internal audit as part of helping to gain comfort over the design of it. But we will obviously always continue to reassess that in the future as part of our individual audits.
I see. So in the internal audit plan where it refers to Mr. Blackburn, he is effectively the manager with whom you will liaise to design the appropriate audit.
No, so he's the person who will receive the report.
I see. All right. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Futrell. Do we have any council who are not in this room? Not today. Are there any applications from the room? No?
Yes, I might. Just a couple, if I may. Ms. Ogno, Mr. Futrell took you to the reporting arrangements, and you talked about the direct access you now have to both the subsidiary boards and to the audit committee of the board. How important is that for internal audit?
To have unfettered access to the board.
Yes.
It's essential.
And is that a requirement of the internal audit standards?
Yes, it is.
And so under the arrangements you have in place, you attend the Burswood Limited board meetings?
Yes, that is correct. On a quarterly basis, not every single one, but I attend on a quarterly basis.
Okay. So the previous arrangements, have you looked at those, what was in place before, where internal audit reports were effectively reported to Burswood Limited by executive?
Yes, I have seen those.
And would that be better practice or consistent with internal audit standards?
The delivery. So the information was presented to them. So it probably meets the minimum expectation, but it would be considered more ideal that somebody from internal audit presents it, sort of better practice.
Right. So did internal audit at the time have any access to non-executive directors on the board?
I don't know. I haven't spoken with Ms. Murray or anyone about that, but I know from my discussions with Ms. Seegers that she didn't present to the boards.
Correct. Thank you.
Ms. Ottner, you said that different boards may have different appetites for different risks. Can I ask you, how do you ascertain what Burswood Limited's risk appetite is for different risks?
So when I talk with them, I will raise, for example, if we were talking about it in relation to an emerging risk. So often an emerging risk, you would look at it from in relation to the overarching risk appetite statement that exists. But if it hasn't yet materialised, it doesn't often fall within the parameters of that. And what I would normally do is present my analysis. So there might be a risk that isn't relevant to the structure of that team or the operations. It might be a geographical risk, for example. So I'd present all of that information. Something that I would normally also do is on an annual basis have a discussion with each of them in relation to the risks, their view, what needs to happen and be input into our plan. There's also off-camera sessions which haven't happened traditionally with Burswood Board, but it will be happening going forward. I've had that discussion with the Deputy Company Secretary, which gives them the opportunity to have a more informal discussion about and ask questions why we might do something or what they think, and we can have an exchange with that management present to be able to make that discussion.
So does the Burswood Limited Board have an appetite statement?
I believe it's a Crown Resorts one. I don't know if it happens I'm talking about emerging risks here, which wouldn't fall part of that. But if it does fall within the formal risk appetite statement, then it would be dictated and guided by that.
So should
Right.
Burswood Limited have its own appetite statement?
It's depends on how you structure your risk management system. Some companies do have it, some companies don't.
In your opinion, as an experienced internal auditor, is it of assistance to an internal auditor?
I have read the risk appetite statement that we have, and I think that it provides clarity across all three. It isn't specific, doesn't reference one. There might be value in having one if there are specific risks relevant to one property and not another. That's where I think it would be useful, but I haven't yet come across that in my time at Crown.
And the only other thing was you've made reference to the Crown ERCC. Perth Casino had an ERC. Have you heard of it?
I've never heard of that, I have to admit.
Thank you.
Ms. Otten, I've got just two questions. Can we bring up the organisational chart? This is so that I make sure I understand it. It's CRW.701.009.4482. Now, we can see the 5 Perth positions there. The bottom left-hand corner, there's 4.
Yep.
In the bottom left-hand corner of the box is the senior IT auditor of the group. Now, you've dealt with this in the table that's in paragraph 19 of your statement, and you've made some comments about the individual positions, or a couple of them, in paragraphs 22 and 23. So I just want to make sure I understand it.
Sure.
Now, the internal audit manager, Perth, has a direct report to you.
Yes.
But then a dotted line report to the position Senior IT Auditor - Group Perth. See that?
No, so how it works is everybody underneath reports to them. So the 3 positions, the 2 senior auditors and the internal auditor, each report to the internal audit manager. The senior IT auditor will be reporting to the internal audit manager of support services, hotels and F&B. That's because the person who holds that position has a background in IT audit. But because they're based in Melbourne, that it's important that they have access to somebody on a day-to-day basis as well, which is why we have a dotted line. So she has 3 direct reports and 1 sort of administrative report, and then they report functionally from an IT audit perspective into the manager based in Melbourne, and the IA manager reports to me.
And that really is my question. This position called Senior IT Auditor - Group Perth.
Yes.
Now, if you're looking at it from using the vernacular, is that position domiciled in Perth or domiciled? It is domiciled in Perth.
Yes.
If you're looking to use the vernacular, who's the boss?
Yes.
Who's the most senior internal audit person in Perth? Which of those 2 positions is it?
Oh, IA manager.
Beg pardon?
IA manager.
So that's Miss Westerhaven.
Vander Westhuizen, yes.
All right, thank you. Now, you mentioned the co-source partners, and the AML area is one of the areas that you may look to gain outside expertise. Can I just ask, what would be the source from which you would get that expertise, those people? For example, would you be looking to the big 4 accounting firms, or small accounting firms, or independent contractors, or where would you find those people?
We're currently speaking with 2 of the big 4 and 1 specialist area.
All right. And in terms of the Perth market,
yes,
we're used to, in Perth at the moment, if you want to find a carpenter or a plumber, you can wait for weeks. In terms of the Perth market, your experience to date is that expertise is available?
You're talking about for co-source.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I'm currently investigating at the moment. So one of the key selection criteria is going to be the availability of at least some of the team to be located in Perth. It is not my requirement that the entire team is located in any one area, because you may have someone with, exceptional experience based in one area, even perhaps overseas in some places, but you would want some of the team, particularly the people on the ground doing the testing, where as much possible based in Perth. And it is a key selection criteria for me in making that decision.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gandy?
I don't have any questions.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ottner, thank you very much for your evidence. It has been of great assistance to us, and you have our gratitude. The summons, I think, the formalities of the summons have been complied with, so we'll discharge the summons. You're free to go about your other duties, again, with our thanks. Thank you, and we will adjourn now and resume at 1 p.m.
Thank you.